You know, there's this massive, invisible machine that powers just about everything in our modern world, the electric grid. It's the biggest, most complex machine humanity has ever built. And right now, it's going through a radical transformation. So let's get into what that really means for all of us.
I mean, have you ever really stopped to think about it? It's something we all just take for granted until the power flickers off. The truth is, keeping that river of electricity flowing perfectly is one of the most incredible engineering challenges on the planet.
And when I say constant, I mean it. For the grid to work, the amount of power being generated has to perfectly, and I mean perfectly, match what we're all consuming in real time, down to the millisecond. If you're off by even a little, you risk catastrophic blackouts.
So this picture gives you a bit of an idea of the scale we're talking about. But here's the crazy part. This is just a simplified test system that engineers use for models. The real-world grid is way, way more complex, and every single one of these little lines and circles has to be managed flawlessly to keep that perfect balance.
Now, for decades, grid operators have been absolute masters of this balancing act. But the entire game is changing right now because the sources of our power are fundamentally changing.
You see, the old grid was built around a handful of huge, predictable power plants. Think of a giant coal or nuclear plant. You can turn them up or down like a massive faucet. But the new grid, the one we're building for the future, relies on thousands of smaller sources, like wind turbines and solar panels. And they are anything but predictable. And this chart just says it all. This shows actual power output from a wind farm. I mean, look at it. It's all over the place. You can't just ask the wind to blow a little harder because it's halftime and everyone's opening their refrigerators. This volatility, this uncertainty, is the single biggest challenge of our transition to renewable energy.
So how in the world do we handle this right now? Well, the current solution, it works. But man, is it a blunt instrument. And it's getting incredibly expensive.
We use something called operating reserves. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a massive insurance policy for the entire grid. We're basically paying some power plants to just sit there, spinning and idle, ready to ramp up at a moment's notice if the sun goes behind a cloud or the wind suddenly stops.
But let's call it what it is. It's a brute force approach. We're burning fuel and spending a ton of money to keep these plants on standby for emergencies that might never even happen. And as we add more and more renewables to the grid, that expensive safety net just gets stretched thinner and thinner.
Okay, so if the old way is so clunky, what's the alternative? This is where the research we're looking at today proposes something really fascinating. Instead of treating every single electron of demand as equally important, what if we introduced a little thing called choice?
The researchers behind this idea frame it perfectly. They say the goal isn't just delivering power. It's delivering power at a desired level of reliability. And that level might be totally different depending on who you are.
This brings us to this really key idea called the value of lost load, or VOL. Just think about it for a second. A power outage that lasts 5 minutes is a life or death crisis in a hospital operating room. But for a warehouse that's closed for the night, it's basically a non-event. They have completely different needs for reliability, and VOL puts a number on that economic reality.
So, the model they propose creates a whole new kind of energy market. It's pretty straightforward. First, big customers, like factories or data centers, would say, hey, this is how much reliability I'm willing to pay for. Then the system crunches the numbers to figure out the real cost of the backup reserves needed to meet those promises. And finally, and this is the important part, the system assigns those costs fairly.
And if that sounds a little abstract, think about it like this. It's just like shipping a package. We do this every day. If you absolutely need that package tomorrow, you pay extra for guaranteed overnight shipping. If you can wait a week, you pick the cheap, standard option. Why can't electricity work the same way?
All right, so the theory sounds pretty smart, right? But the million-dollar question is, does it actually hold up in the real world? Well, the researchers ran some incredibly detailed simulations to find out.
And here we go, our first piece of visual proof. That solid blue line shows the amount of backup reserves needed in the old one-size-fits-all system. Now look at the dashed black line. That's the new model with customer choice. By tailoring reliability to only what's actually needed, the system needs way fewer reserves at certain times of the day. It's just so much more efficient.
Let's dig into the numbers. That upward spinning reserve, that's the critical backup power we talked about, it drops significantly. That is a huge efficiency gain. Now, you might notice that the total expected cost goes up just a little bit. And that sounds bad, but it's actually a good thing. It means the customers who demand perfect 100% reliability are now paying the true price for it, instead of having the rest of us subsidize their needs. It's a fairer system. And get this, the model is even smarter than just managing day-to-day stuff. It can actually help us plan a better grid for the future. In the simulation, they tested different spots to build a new wind farm, and they found that putting it at one specific point, called bus 3 here, dramatically lowered the operating costs for the whole system, mostly because it was closer to where people were using the power.
Okay, but here's the real kicker. This is the chart that pulls it all together. When you take this smart customer choice model and you add wind power into the mix, look what happens to the total cost. It drops a lot. This proves that a smarter grid doesn't just make room for renewables, it actually uses them to make the entire system cheaper for everyone.
So let's step back for a second. What does all this really mean? This isn't just some academic paper. This is a blueprint for a fundamental redesign of how we think about energy.
When you boil it all down, this new approach makes it way easier and cheaper to bring more renewables online. It creates a fairer market where you pay for what you actually need. It puts more control and choice into the hands of consumers. And it builds a grid that's just plain smarter, more resilient, and ready for the 21st century.
And it leaves us with this one last pretty cool thought. Right now, you probably pay for a certain internet speed, right? Maybe you pay a little more for faster fiber. What if you could do the same exact thing for your electricity? Imagine choosing a basic, cheaper plan for most of your house, but paying for a premium, uninterruptible supply just for your home office. That's the kind of future this research is pointing to.